Welcome back to another edition of the Knight Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie O'Leary, and Doug Bucshon of Orange and Blue News on the Rivals.com network. We're going to go into everything with the Rutgers Illini and Illini matchup this upcoming weekend. But first, this podcast is presented to you by Knight and Day Apparel. Hey, Rutgers fans. Get ready to slam dunk your style with Knight and Day Apparel. Cheer on your Scarlet Knights this basketball season in our exclusive Rutgers gear. From trend-setting designs to lifestyle garments, we've got you covered with everything you need to support your team in comfort and flair. Stand out in the crowd and show your passion for Rutgers basketball with designs that celebrate every dribble, dunk, and victory. Use our promo code Rutgers Rivals to get 10% off your purchase. Don't wait. Head to Knight and Day Apparel today and gear up for game day. Go Knights. We're also presented to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and ability to watch games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds from everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted betting platform. BetOnline, the game starts here. Doug, it's been a pretty banner year for Illini football. This is Brett Bielema's, fourth or fifth year with the program?
Year four, yeah.
Year four.
Year four.
What are the general vibes from fans around the program right now? Are they excited about the program? I know you guys had a bunch of huge wins this year. Just tell us a little bit about how the fans feel about Illini football right now.
Yeah, I think they see that Brett Bielema has elevated the program. They look like they're going to be an annual contender for a bowl game, and they've overachieved this year. Coming into the year, most of the preseason prognosticators, the preseason magazines, all that stuff, thought that they were kind of a borderline bowl team just based on the overall talent in the program and recruiting and results last year and all that stuff. And sitting at 7-3 at this point in the season, you can't really ask for more than that. I think the Michigan State game was kind of a turning point for them because you didn't know where it was going to go. That some of the teams they beat early in the season, like Kansas, for example, didn't turn out to be quite as good as you thought they were going to be. So those wins, you're kind of questioning them a little bit, but bounce back game against Michigan State, played really well on offense and kind of got things right back on track after two losses in a row. They lost to Oregon, which was to be expected at Oregon, number one team in the country. But the home loss to Minnesota was kind of a letdown, I thought. Didn't play well offensively. Luke Altmaier was sacked a bunch of times. But to have that bounce back game last week, I think was really big for him. And fans are jumping back on board. Sold out the Michigan game and won that game. I know Michigan's not Michigan this year, but big win for them. So I think they see a program on the upswing. They see a competitive program week to week, and recruiting's got to pick up for them, obviously, and they got to hit the portal again this year. But I think fans are pretty excited about the program and the way that it's headed under Brett Bielema.
Doug, you said overachieving. I don't know if anyone's really overachieved more than Luke Altmaier. He's had a hell of a year, 2,100 yards, 18 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. What makes him such a good quarterback?
Well, he's got arm talent. He's an accurate passer. He puts the ball where it's catchable. Good athlete. He can run around and make plays. Really the key for Altmaier is giving him a clean pocket. When he's got a clean pocket, he's very accurate, makes timely throws. Made a great throw over the top to Pat Bryant last week, to open the scoring, a 57-yard touchdown, just a great throw into the wind. So, really accurate passer. When he's under duress, his decision-making's been a little sketchy, and I think that's what happened against Minnesota and definitely against Oregon. But, the Oregon speed really hurt him coming off the edge. But talented kid. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's kind of unassuming when you see him in person. But he's accurate. He's a tough kid and a very underrated athlete. I mean, he can make plays with his feet if you flush him from the pocket.
Yeah, it seems like it's been very hit or miss with pass protection this year. There's 5 games where he was sacked 3 or more times, and the rest of the games combined, he's got 3 sacks total, or 5 sacks total. But speaking of the schedule, the thing that stood out like a sore thumb to me was the Purdue game for you guys. I know you had a huge lead early, and Purdue just kind of clawed back. Purdue isn't known for scoring a ton of points this year. What was it about Purdue that day that made it such a challenging game for Illinois?
Great question. And Illinois fans will tell you there's kind of a curse when it comes to Purdue. They just never seem to play very well against Purdue, and maybe it's a little overstated. But Ryan Walters does know Illinois very well. Obviously, he was a defensive coordinator at Illinois. I think he had him very well scouted. But just breakdowns on defense, you know, Purdue put up a bunch of yards, put up a bunch of points, and they had to beat them in overtime. And that was a kind of a head shaker game for Illinois. But I think every team has one or two of those kind of games during the season where you're like, what the heck happened? And that game against Purdue was one of those games.
I know I talked about the pass attack before, but the rushing attack's been a little bit lackluster, it seems like. There's a bunch of different backs on the team that have gotten carries this year. They haven't gotten more than 75 yards in the past 5 games. What just seems to be the issue there? Because it seems like Bielema always has the guys up front ready to play and ready to block at least.
Yeah, I mean, they're a zone scheme, basically, and I think that they got a group of linemen who just haven't had it. When you run a zone scheme, you have to have good teamwork up front, and I think it's a group that's got individual talent, but haven't always worked all that great together as a team. Their timing's a little bit off. They during the zone blocking and the combination blocks just don't have good timing in terms of coming off that initial block and going to the second tier defender and that kind of stuff. And they've been inconsistent. When they're good, but when they're bad, they're pretty bad. And some of the runs on the inside zone and outside zone have gone nowhere. A lot of runs that have gone for 1 yard or negative yards. And Caden Fagan got hurt. He was basically their starting tailback, and now they've gone to a 3-man rotation with 3 different guys who can kind of bring 3 different things to the table: a power runner and Josh McCray, more of a quick guy, and Khalil Valentine, the freshman, then an all-purpose guy in Lawfrey, who's a fast kid, but not a real natural runner, but a kid, if you get him in space, he can outrun guys and make tacklers miss.
Kind of piggybacking on that offensive line talk, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Kevin Wingington. I know he's not playing much, but what seems to be the issue there? I know Rutgers fans were kind of excited because it sounded like he was going to go to Rutgers at first, and then last second went to Illinois.
Yeah, he came in a little bit out of shape when he got here, when he came out of the portal, and expectations were pretty high. He's a versatile kid. He can play guard, he can play center, maybe even move outside if you need him to, but just never got it going, and never really found his niche on the offensive line, and got behind guys and never caught up, and we haven't seen a whole lot of him this season.
I find it so interesting because, Mike, you might remember this. During Shiano's bowl press conferences, he mentioned how a kid visited campus and said he saw the practice and said, "Whoa, I can't do that. I'm out of here." And there was rumors it was him. So it makes a lot of sense now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember that. But speaking of the offensive line, I say this with knowing that numbers can sometimes be deceiving. So I like to ask the people who cover the teams to see if these stats kind of show in the production on the field, and sometimes they don't. You guys are 106th in sacks allowed at 2.8 per game, and you're 121st in the FBS in tackles for loss allowed per game with 7.1. Does that show up on film? Is that something you guys have struggled with all season? Is a lot of havoc behind the backfield?
Yeah. I mean, the stats don't lie. And like I said, it's more inconsistency than lack of talent. I think they have some talent on the offensive line. They have some bulk for sure. J.C. Davis, left tackle, was one of the best tackles in the portal last year coming from New Mexico. He's a good player. They got guys, when you look at them individually, you're thinking, hey, this is a pretty decent offensive line. It's not a great offensive line, but it's good enough, I think. And the sacks have been missed assignments, bad decisions, I think, and they really started piling up. I mean, Luke was really under a ton of pressure, and that's really one of the main reasons for the 2-game losing streak and some of the hiccups in the offense was because, like I said, when he's got a clean pocket, he's very good. He's an accurate passer, makes good decisions, quick reads, but when he's under duress, it's a little bit different.
Talking about the defense, the other side of the ball, Aaron Henry, former Rutgers guy, obviously a much different Rutgers from when he was here. But did he say anything in his press conference this week?
Yeah, he said a whole bunch of stuff. Aaron always says a lot of stuff.
That's true.
You only get about 3 or 4 questions at a press conference with Aaron Henry because he gives really long answers and detailed answers. Really great guy. everybody at Illinois really loves having him around, and I think he's matured a lot as a play caller on defense. The replacing Ryan Walters with Aaron Henry, I think it turned some heads. He didn't have a lot of experience as a play caller, as a defensive coordinator. He's been a DB coach his whole career, but stopping the running game, he talked a lot about that with Rutgers. Obviously, that's what you got to do to beat Rutgers. You can't make a whole lot of mistakes because Rutgers doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. A very fundamentally sound team with a coach that focuses on that, on not beating themselves. So he talked a lot about tackling, a lot about stopping the Rutgers running game.
It seems like you guys are really good at just limiting scoring, but you allow a decent amount of yards. Red zone defense is another area it looks like you guys have struggled with. You allow a score on 90% of possessions in the red zone. Is that something that has been somewhat of a point of emphasis for this defense, is trying to limit scoring in the red zone? Because it seems like that's an area that's fairly low ranking for you guys.
Yeah, early in the season they were really good in the red zone, making teams settle for field goals. And I think that's one of the reasons why they had the early success, and turning teams over, I think, has been big for them too. I think they still have a positive turnover rating, maybe a +1 or plus 0.5 or something like that. So they've been turning teams over a little bit. They haven't been bad in the red zone. They've had their issues between the 20s and allowed long drives and third down conversions, but they haven't been that bad in the red zone as far as making teams settle for field goals.
Now, they've been pretty good in the passing defense in the secondary, it seems like. What just seems to be the strength there? Would you say it's their corners, safeties? Is it more of a zone, man-to-man? I haven't watched a ton of Illinois, to be honest with you.
Aaron Henry likes to play a lot of man-to-man. They play a lot of man-to-man. They'll play some cover 2 and cover 3 and stuff like that sometimes, but it's mostly man-to-man defense, and that's what they like to play. I think they upgraded the secondary through the portal, in the offseason. Last year they had a really bad year, and there's no two ways about it. The secondary had a really rough year. That year of experience, I think, bringing back guys like Xavier Scott at the nickel, he's kind of their biggest playmaker back there in the secondary. They run a lot of nickel. That's really their base defense, is the nickel defense, 5 DBs. And Miles Scott of free safeties had a good year. The corners have been pretty good. They've especially early in the year where they were picking guys off and had some interceptions. So it's an improved secondary. It's not where they want to be yet, I think, but it's a lot better than it was last year.
Tell us about a little bit about Gabe Jacobs. He's third in the Big Ten in sacks with 8. Is he just a force along the defensive line? And I apologize if I said his last name wrong.
It's Gabe Akis. And, well, he's just a physical beast. I mean, he's a guy that you see him on the hoof walking around. You're like, whoa, who's that guy? He's an NFL-looking guy, and he was that way from the first day he stepped on campus as a true freshman. He was just a big guy and an athlete. He's a bull rusher, and I think they make it hard on offensives by kind of moving him around a little bit. He mostly plays standing up at outside linebacker, at edge rusher, but they'll put his hand on the ground sometimes, and if they have the right matchup. They've done that a lot this year. And he just overwhelms guys with his power, and he's got a good get off. He can turn speed to power, but he's not a guy that's going to run around guys. He kind of goes right through them, and he's been a force. He's gotten better as the season has gone along, and he's looking more and more like they may not have him next year. He's a junior academically, but I think he's a guy who's definitely going to have a decision to make in terms of the NFL draft after the season.
Are you going?
Yeah, who else should Rutgers fans be on the lookout for as a playmaker along your defense?
I mentioned Xavier Scott. I mean, he makes a lot of plays in space. He's the best tackler on the team, and according to PFF, if you believe that stuff, some of it's good, some of it's not. But according to PFF, he's one of the best tacklers among all defensive backs in the country. He doesn't miss many tackles. He's in a playmaking position at the nickel. He's right there in the box and every play is in front of him. He's a guy that they lean on really hard, and if he's not in the lineup, the defense kind of takes a step back. And that's definitely a guy to watch. free safety Miles Scott, strong safety Matthew Bailey is kind of coming on. He's had some issues with tackling, but had a really good game last week against Michigan State. Up front, they rotate a ton of guys. So I don't know if there's any one guy, maybe nose tackle T.Y. Edwards, who's a two-gap run stuffer at nose tackle, and he can collapse the pocket every now and then. But it's kind of a by committee when it comes to the defensive line.
Yeah, you mentioned PFF and an individual in Scott's tackling, but according to the rankings, you guys are 6th overall in tackling as a team, and that's your highest rated statistic along PFF. I know you mentioned that's a point of emphasis, but it does seem like it's showing up in the numbers as well that you guys are a pretty sound tackling group that doesn't miss a ton of tackles collectively. Let's transition to special teams. Are there any standout areas along the special teams, good or bad, for the Illini?
Yeah, I mean, punt returner Hank Beatty. He after last week, he's got enough punt returns to qualify for national recognition. Now he's 8th in the country, I think, in punt returns. I believe he's 1st in the Big Ten. And he's a weapon. He just knows how to find space and chew up yards, and he gives them really good field position. That was a big factor for him against Michigan State last week. He had one called back on a holding call that would have been another really good return. So he's kind of the star of the special teams right now, and an all Big Ten contender at punt return.
What about place kicker David Alano? I know he's pretty accurate when it comes to 40 in, and then he's only missed when he's 40 out. But he's also hit a couple 40 out. How accurate would you say he is?
He's accurate. He's a young kid. I think he's just a redshirt freshman, maybe a sophomore, but he's a good kicker. And they've had a string of good kickers at Illinois. They recruited, they put an emphasis on it and recruited him and gave him a scholarship. So he's a talented kid. He was one of the top high school kickers in the country when he came out of high school. He's not going to miss too many, like you said, from 40 in. Very, very accurate kicker.
Is it just a lack of leg power, or like what's causing these misses?
If you see him, he's a real skinny kid. I think he's just, he's hitting the weights. He's going to get bigger and he's going to get stronger. But his leg strength is good, but not great. So,
gotcha.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think will be an X factor for this game on Saturday?
Well, can Illinois stop the run? I mean, that's kind of the story going into the game. They've had their issues. If you look at their statistics, they've had a lot of trouble stopping the run during the course of the season, and you're going to get that against Rutgers, a very physical team. They're going to pound and ground, and that's really the key to the game for Illinois, stopping the run. And they're missing their starting middle linebacker Dylan Rosiak, who had a broken ankle. He's out for the year. He had surgery, so they're rotating 3 or 4 different guys at middle linebacker. And they played well against Michigan State, but Michigan State doesn't have the same kind of running game as Rutgers does. So we'll see how that works out on Saturday.
And Rutgers fans can attest, once you lose a high-level linebacker, how that can make a defense sort of fall apart. We dealt with that in the middle of the season, where we had to run with 2 backup linebackers, and it wasn't pretty. So let's talk about how you think this game's going to go. What's your prediction for how things shake out on Saturday?
Boy, this is a hard game to predict. It's an evenly matched game, I think. Both teams playing well. Rutgers has turned their season around, playing their best football right now, I think. It may come down to quarterback play. And I think Illinois has a little bit of advantage when it comes to with the quarterback and the passing game. And if it turns into that kind of game where it's on the shoulders of Luke Altmaier, I like Illinois. But if they don't stop the run, if they give up a ton of third down conversions, and as you were talking about, touchdowns in the red zone, it could be Rutgers Day. So really hard one to predict. I've gone back and forth on it. I tend to think Illinois by a field goal or a point or just a really close game because of the quarterback situation with both teams in the passing game. I think Illinois with Altmaier and Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin on the outside, those 2 wide receivers are going to be tough on Rutgers. So I'll be a little bit of a homer and say Illinois by a field goal, but I don't feel real comfortable with that pick.
How about you, Rich? How do you think the game's going to go on Saturday?
Doug already knows my prediction because I sent it over to him already. But yeah, no, it's basically the complete opposite. I have Rutgers winning by a field goal. I think Rutgers rushing attack should be able to get things going. We know how Greg Schiano wants to play keep away when he has the ball. If he can get a 7-0 lead, he'd win 7-0 if he could. He would love it. I would actually be ecstatic by it. They are 67th in the country when it comes to rushing defense, 110th when it comes to tackles for loss in the running game on the rushing defense side. So I just have a feeling that Kyle Monangai might be able to have a pretty big day. Even if he's not 100%, they still have Antoine Raymond, who's been pretty good. Jashawn Benjamin has been pretty good for them as well over the past couple weeks. I think Rutgers' rushing attack is going to be the difference maker here. On top of that, their defense is not fully healthy, but it's healthier than it's ever been this season, probably. So I think that this would kind of lean in Rutgers' favor. But again, like Doug said, I'm not even confident in this one. It could go either way. It's probably going to be ugly, boring Big Ten football under 40 points. So
we say that, and we both say that, and I agree with that. But he never turns out like you think it's going to, right? So maybe it'll probably be like 40-38 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's Rutgers' running game against Illinois' passing game, and who knew? Brett Bielema teams you always think Wisconsin and the power running game, but that's not the strength of the team this year. They're better in the passing game with some really good outside receivers and Altmaier throwing the ball. So it's definitely an interesting matchup.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll say this with a caveat that my last few predictions have not been accurate. It seems like everything the last half of the season has been the opposite. So take that with a big grain of salt. But I feel like Rutgers just figured something out in the bye week. Greg's really good at like introducing these new motivational tactics, and his big thing was he brought in a Navy SEAL to talk about this drill that they would do, where it's like I think it was a 5-on-50 drill where they were trying to get people across like a river or something like that. And they've really bought into this, like, you know, I'm with you, like we're going to get to the other side of the field and we're going to do it together. And the team has been playing with more cohesion post-bye than I think they have all season. Their pass rush the last 2 games has really been beefed up. I couldn't tell you exactly why. They talked about breaking the defense down to the studs and rebuilding it in the bye week. And whatever they did collectively is really working on defense. The last 2 games they've had, I think, their 2 most amounts of pressure in each game over the course of the season. Given that Altmaier seems to make mistakes while under pressure and Illinois' offensive line hasn't played well, I'm going to give the Scarlet Knights the edge here. I'm going to say they win by 4. I'm going to say 27-23 the final score. Doug, we really appreciate your time. Where can Rutgers fans find your work and find you on social media?
At illinois.rivals.com or orangeandbluenews.com. We're there every day. On social media, it's our X account is at Illinois Rivals. And we have a Facebook page, of course, and a YouTube page, too, that they can check out.
Awesome. Well, thanks once again for joining. For me and Richie, this has been another edition of the Knight Report podcast, signing off.